Hello, I'm Tony Guida. This is My New York. We open today with a quiz. What would happen if thousands of gainfully employed workers in this state lost their jobs by order of the government? First, of course, would be the struggle to put food on the table. And then there's this. New York would lose an estimated $140 million in state and local taxes paid by those workers. Who are they? They are unauthorized immigrants, so-called dreamers, whose right to remain in this country is threatened by President Trump. The DACA debate, next. We are here today to talk about DACA, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program that has been much in the news, continues to be much in the news, and I imagine is going to be much in the news for months to come. We have three guests. Let me introduce you to, first of all, Pamela Chomba. She is the Northeast Organizing Director at Forward US, which is a lobbying group for immigration reform. We have Allan Wernick, Baruch College professor, the director of
CUNY Citizenship now.
Okay, and we're going to explain what that is in a moment. And Allan is the oracle of all things immigration. You want to know anything, he knows it. And we have Isaac Montiel, who is a student at City Tech and the co-president of CUNY Dreamers organization. Welcome to all of you. Allan, first of all, give us a thumbnail for our viewers to understand what DACA is and how it came to be.
Well, DACA is a program that provides employment authorization and the right to travel abroad and some protection from deportation to undocumented youth. It came to be because after many years of trying to find a legislative solution for this group of people who came here at a very young age, many without their parents, and who basically grew up in the United States, are basically Americans for all practical purposes, even though legally they were undocumented. President Obama, in June of 2012, announced this program, and it allowed people who had come to the United States before the age of 16, who had been in the United States for 5 years as of the date of the announcement of the program, and who had a clean criminal record, who were in school or had graduated from school, to be able to stay in the United States for 2-year renewable intervals. So that's basically the DACA program. Now what's happened is that with the new administration, there's no longer accepting renewals. So when people's status expires beginning March 6th, if their status expires, they won't be able to renew it under the current plan. And there was a 1-month period that just ended that allowed for individuals whose status would expire between September 5th and March 5th of next year to apply for a renewal. So those people will get the 2-year renewals, but beginning March 6th, the program will end unless something's done, unless there's a legislative solution out of Congress or the president decides to extend the program again.
I guess, Pamela, we should talk about, just to give our audience an idea of how many people this encompasses, United States and statewide, Pamela or Isaac. Pamela?
So very quickly, what Allan mentioned is starting March 6th, people will lose their renewal permits or work authorization permits. But we also have to point out that almost 40,000 DACA recipients did not apply for that renewal within the month period. So we're going to see 40,000 people lose their work permit before March 6th already. Okay. And averagely, starting March 6th, it'll be 1,400 people losing work permits a day. Leaving the workforce, an average of 30,000 people a month. I mean, I'm one of the DACA recipients that could not renew my work permit within that month period. So one of 800,000 people are waiting on the brink of what's next.
So I think the numbers are roughly 800,000 DACA recipients nationwide. What, 30,000 or so in New York State?
44,000.
44,000, yes, close to 50,000, 44,000 after that, yes.
Isaac, tell us your story. How did you come here? Where's your background? When did you get DACA status? Let the audience know what.
So I first arrived when I was 13 years old. I arrived to New Haven, Connecticut.
From?
From Mexico.
Uh-huh.
And to read now with my mother. She's an undocumented and single mother, hardworking. And I was able, once I realized about my status, my immigration status, until then, United States, Connecticut, it felt like home. Felt like home. But then after I finding out my immigration status, I felt rejected. I felt sad and frustrated. But also I felt like all the doors started closing on me. Opportunities, my hopes and my dreams, they were crushed. I was planning on going to college. At that moment, I realized that might not be a possibility. Otherwise, besides that, I decided not to give up. And then once DACA came about, that's when finally had the opportunity to not only obtain a driver's license, but also able to rent a house. And I decided to move to New York because I got a private scholarship, full ride scholarship to continue my education. It took me about 5 years to complete my associate's degree. I had to work part-times and a full-time, and I was still paying out-of-state tuition. But once I completed that, it was just about time when DACA was enacted in 2012. So I decided to once again quit everything and move to New York. And that's where in New York I found home. In CUNY I found home, a family within CUNY Dreamers, which is a student-led organization lead and created by undocumented students within CUNY to create a network of support for them.
Pamela, your story.
Yeah, I'm also a DACA recipient. My family and I came here through a visa, which many of us have also done. From Peru. We overstayed our visa because my parents and I agreed that at 11 years old, I wanted to go to an American university. That was my dream, honestly, since I was 5. So I graduated from a private university with private scholarships, but also with merits. And I worked really hard. My parents had to pay out of pocket almost $20,000 to $25,000 a year so that I could go to that school. And after 2012, when I graduated from Mary's College, I had no other thing to do with my degree. I was this person with higher education that could not apply for work. But President Obama passed DACA, and to me that was the executive action that I needed and that I didn't know I was looking for, because it allowed me to come out of the shadows and say I'm here to fight for my community and work for my community. I was a community organizer before I started working with Forward, and I was a political activist before Forward as well, because I believe that we need to listen to our community to see what's going on. And our community says that 90% of Americans also support Dreamers and a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers. So I'm fighting for those Americans that believe that I deserve an earned pathway to citizenship as well, and that we're looking to Congress to do that legislative solution.
What is your, well, as I want to make sure I understand this correctly. You and Isaac are sort of on 2-year renewals all the time. And as Professor Wernick pointed out a moment ago, that could end next March. What's your goal? What besides working for Forward and having that job, do you have other goals and
There's so many aspirations. I'm so glad that you asked, because I'm a community organizer at the end of the day, and I want to make sure that my community has access to healthcare, that I work for local governments to make sure that we're creating public support and public safety for that. I like working in campaigns. When I believe in a candidate, I will fight for that candidate to make sure that they offer that. So my response, it's to continue to work in politics. And honestly, I've been flirting with the idea of running myself.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you said community organizer. We should understand what community you're talking about.
So I'm from New York, New Jersey, and I started organizing in my hometown of Newark. And, I got to speak to many immigrants, to African-American communities, and to third-generation immigrants. We have a large Portuguese population as well. And a lot of them, really want to be represented as well.
And this is what Forward US essentially...
This is before I joined Forward.
Yes, before Forward.
And then with Forward US, my job is, to talk with folks like Isaac that are dreamers themselves and they want to share their story because they know that the American population supports them as well. So I work with many more dreamers like Isaac and work with other business leaders in the New York area and the tri-state area that are supportive of the issue and that will also call on to Congress to pass this. In fact, nearly 900 business leaders signed a letter to President Trump first and then to leadership in Congress asking them to pass the DREAM Act because not only do they employ DACA recipients, but they also know that this is the moral best thing to do.
I'm intrigued by your potential political aspirations. What do you think you want to run for? What kind of a position?
Well, I can't say where I'm going to start. I definitely want to stick to Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl. It's my hometown. But, you know, I know some friends have said Senate, and that's down the line for sure.
I hope we get a chance to see the Pamela Chomba campaign. Let's talk about you a little bit. Your aspirations after, I mean, you're in, what did you say, you're in your final semester?
Yes, my final semester.
Okay. And after that, what do you see yourself doing?
Well, first of all, I'm very proud because I'll be the first one in my family to finally graduate with a bachelor's degree. And that's a very good accomplishment. And of course, I have gained a lot of experience working with CUNY Dreamers and working with different groups of students within the university. And also we're looking to work with other universities as well. So that's something that we don't only focus on helping undocumented students, but also non-DACA and DACA recipients in professional development with how to tell the story, also how to, you know, create a resume, do interviews, do jobs. So that's something that every community needs, every student in college needs. And I gained a lot of experience and a lot of context with people that are willing to help us out with these trainings. And that's something I would like to see myself going on apart from my career, which is IT specialist. And yeah, continue working with the community of students and with the community of immigrants.
Let's get into this thicket, Professor. As you pointed out, President Obama started this program and you defined it. Now, the new administration says, in effect, it needs to be fixed and Congress needs to fix it. What needs to be fixed about it?
Well,
or is there anything that needs to be fixed?
Well, the problem with the program is that it doesn't really give any assurance for people. That's very hard to plan for your future when you every 2 years you have to renew, and at any time, because it was an executive action under Obama, what Obama gave, Trump can take back. When candidate Trump said that on January 20th when he was sworn in, he was going to end the program, and he didn't. And it's carried on. It's been going on. It has not changed until the most recent announcement, which we already discussed, where the program is going to effectively begin ending on March 6th. So the alternative to
why I remember as a candidate, and even later, even in the early part of the early days of his presidency, him saying he wants to end it. Why does he want to end it? What's wrong with it?
You have to ask him that. You have to ask him that. I mean, I think it's a great program. I think he wants to. I think to me, it's just a political ploy. In other words, he wants to push the Democratic Party to give him more support around border enforcement, his building of the wall, and other restrictive immigration issues. So he's holding out because he knows that the DACA recipients are such a popular and well-accepted group. I mean, don't forget, these people came before the age of 16. They had to be in school. Over 95% are either working or in school, many of them both. Some are in medical school, law school. Many of them are teachers. So it's a program that's very popular among the public. It's very popular among the business community. It's popular among the religious community. It has labor support. So everybody supports DACA. So what he's trying to do, I think, is to use
it as a bargaining chip.
Use it as a bargaining chip. Use these young people who are contributing so much and say, we're going to take away from them if you don't give me what I want.
And what he wants is, among other things, the wall.
Well, he had a long list of announcements. I mean, he's not going to get these things, by the way, in my opinion. But he says he wants increased border enforcement, increased interior enforcement, and a number of other restrictions on the way immigration legal immigration is run in this country. There's no way Congress is going to do anything like that. What we would like to see, what I would like to see, is legislation that just deals with the dreamers, gives them some kind of permanency, gives them a path to citizenship. Long path, short path, that's something to be negotiated. But something where the only issue on the table is, let's get some legal status for these individuals that is legislated, that doesn't go by the whim of the president. If, let's say President Trump supports DACA, but and it lets it go on until the next election. What if somebody else becomes president? The DACA program could end. So this is not it's not tenable for the employers. It's not tenable for the universities, and most importantly, it's not tenable for the young people who are trying to plan their lives. I mean, we have 800,000 of some of the most ambitious, hardworking, aggressive, smart young people that could really, help lead this nation into the 21st century, and we just want to put them on the wayside and say, go fend for yourself, sending flowers on the street. I mean, it makes no sense. So, I'm optimistic that there will be some kind of legislative solution. We'll have to see.
I want to check a statistic with any of you. As I understand it, of these 800,000 DACA recipients in the country right now, the vast majority have come from Mexico, like 700,000. Is that right?
I think it's a mix. We have not only from Latin America, but from other countries.
But it's about 75%.
75%.
Yes.
75%.
When I read that, it was hard for me to escape the notion that underpinning President Trump's statements about ending DACA is racial. There's a racial component to this. Do you see that? Do you not see that? Do you care one way or the other?
I think at the heart of it, it's a component that we have people and consultants around President Trump that don't like immigrants at all, and that actually have been tied to eugenic organizations in the past. So I think that President Trump, at the heart of it, likes dreamers. Even before he considered running for president, he made statements about how we needed to support dreamers at the end. And his latest statements on the issue have been, we're going to find a solution for dreamers. Yet there are people in the White House that are contradictive of that and are contradicting the president's order. And that is because they have been trying for years and decades to change the country's policies on immigration because of all these organizations and the work that they've been doing that has been tied to eugenic groups. So some of the people around him, I think, really do contemplate this as a race issue, but we need to look at what the president has spoken when it comes to dreamers and what Congress needs to do.
And am I correct that you're in agreement that something needs to be done in Congress, a fix, perhaps not the fix that the president was talking about, but something to establish status and take you, Pamela, and 800,000 others out of this limbo? Something needs to happen, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's what we're pushing for, a Clean Dream Act, something that's not attached to any enforcements or any policies. Because, yeah, it's more than 800,000. We are stuck in limbo, and we don't know what's going to happen. It's uncertain about our future, and we need to start thinking about ways, how can we keep support this country and our legislator that's not,
Professor, how do you read the political winds on this? I mean, I was interested that the House Speaker, Ryan, and Senator Orrin Hatch, two very prominent Republicans, have urged the president not to kill DACA. That's, one thing. But how do you read what they and others in Congress are willing to do in terms of the fix?
I'm very optimistic that there will be some kind of legislative solution that provides a path to citizenship, that gives people some right, statutory right, not just administrative order, but a statutory right to a legal status, eventually permanent residence, eventually U.S. citizenship. And I say that because as I mentioned before, there's so much support in the community. I mean, basically every sector now of our society has come around saying they want to do something for the dream, even some very conservative members of Congress. So I'm very optimistic. If there's no clean DREAM Act, I would say the next most likely thing would be some kind of increase in border enforcement. This was talked about. That was what was discussed by Senator Schumer when he met with the president, and came out of that meeting maybe prematurely saying they had made a deal, but that was the deal that they were talking about. You know, since then, the president has come out with these really extreme restrictionist demands attached to DACA legislation. But I feel my analysis of it is that that's just talk, that's just bluster. It's a way of pandering to people who would like to see a more restrictive immigration future in the United States. I don't think that's going to come about that way. I have a lot of confidence in the Democratic legislative leadership, but also have a lot of confidence in the Dreamers. You know, one thing I didn't mention when I talked to you about the history of it, you know, in summer of 2012, Dreamers sat in campaign headquarters of President Obama and said, we want some executive action because you have not given us the DREAM Act. You said you were going to give us immigration reform. You're running for office. You're not going to get this done unless you give us something. And I told people, I said, he's going to do something. And sure enough, in June 2012, he did something. And the lesson there is, the Dreamers, and I mean, we have two great examples here, but there's thousands and thousands, and I've met with many of them, who they're very tenacious. They have the audacity of youth. That's what I like to talk about. Stuff that they have the guts and the willingness and the creativity that I no longer have. And I have a lot of confidence that with them leading the struggle, and I think I would just make that important point for the various organizations and politicians who are out there. You have to listen to the Dreamers. They're the ones who are affected by it. That's what I try to do. We were talking about that in the green room. I look to the Dreamers to tell me how they think the struggle should be waged. I think they know how to do it, and I think they're going to win it.
I'm galvanized by your
well, I'm optimistic and I'm enthusiastic,
right.
But I hope I'm right.
Let me play devil's advocate for a moment. Pamela, you were talking about, you know, important people in the administration around the president. One of those is the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, who has said he has couched his opposition to this program in, I guess, what you'd call economic terms. That this is a threat. Native Americans, lose jobs to people like you, because they're allowed to have work permits under this program. So he has said, at least, this is a threat to Native American workers. It's about jobs.
I don't think so, because we have gone through a struggle. We have compromised with the laws, and we got ourselves a job. We got ourselves a degree, and we earned those jobs. We earned what we have. We are not taking it away from anyone. We are getting our degrees in complementing with all the rules and regulations according to get that position that we have. So we're not taking it from anyone.
And what Attorney General Sessions said was absolutely false, honestly. Immigrants have shown time and time again that we create more jobs for American citizens.
Okay.
I know DACA recipients that have founded organizations and have employed more than 800,000 American citizens. 800 American citizens. I know DACA recipients in the New York tri-state area that have their own tech companies and they continue to employ American citizens. Attorney General Sessions cannot come and tell me to my face that we are taking away jobs when we have proven to be creating more jobs for our fellow citizens. And also, honestly, when you enter the job market, you're competing with people from all over. They look at your resume. There is no resume where I'm going to write, I'm a DACA recipient, please employ me, right? I have to compete for the job that I have. And many of the DACA recipients that I met had to compete really hard, and some of them had to go through unemployment periods until they could demonstrate they were the right person for that position. So it's never about taking away American jobs. It honestly is about having an earned pathway, because we have earned it. We have been here averagely before we were 16. The average age of the DACA recipient is 26 years old, and they were here when they were 6 years old. So they only know this country as home. And unfortunately for some of them, they had I know Nita, for instance, she had pathway to get a green card through her grandmother. Her grandmother was sponsoring a green card for her, but because her grandmother passed away, you know, all those dreams of obtaining a green card by 11 years old disappeared. And that's the case of many people as well, that they just fall through the cracks of a broken immigration system. And the one thing that DACA has given us is that it has demonstrated for 5 years that allowing dreamers to come out of the shadows and be part of the workforce works for every American. It has boosted our economy so much, and we know that it will continue to boost our economy if we have a permanent legislative solution.
Do I need to mention at this point that this country was built by immigrants? I mean, people like my father, who came from Italy and opened a fruit and vegetable market and employed a few people and created some jobs.
And had a successful son.
And had a successful, well, you couldn't argue with how whether it's successful, and daughter too. I guess at this point it's I wonder if I can hear criticism from the audience that nobody on this panel is a ardent opponent of DACA, and we didn't properly represent that point of view, but frankly I don't care, because to me the idea that immigrants are something to be feared or something to be shunned or something to be kept out by a wall is ludicrous, and that's how
well, I would just say, I think if you look at the future of the world, if the United States develops an attitude where they see immigrants as hurting our economy and restricts immigration, I think it's really the doom of the American economy, because so much of intellectual, manufacturing, agriculture work is so transportable now. Mm-hmm. That if we don't bring the immigrants here to do the work here, the work is just going to go abroad.
Well, Professor, I hope your optimism is well founded. I know that the months ahead are crucial, and I would imagine our audience and others, many others, are going to be watching this issue closely and see what Congress does, if they do anything at all. And by the way, hasn't the president said if Congress doesn't do something, he's just going to end it? Am I
That's
correct?
No. He said he's going to. His most recent statement was, if Congress doesn't do anything, he'll consider extending it again. So that's what I predict would happen. If Congress doesn't act, which is possible that it won't, despite my optimism, I think the president is going to have to extend it. I don't think he really has much choice, and he's said so recently.
Okay. We have to leave it there. Pamela, it's been a delight to have you with us.
Thank you for having us.
Isaac.
Thank you.
And Professor Wernick.
It was a great pleasure.
The oracle of immigration. There's more you can learn from him about this subject than anything else, and you should look into his the organization that you direct. Give us the name.
Citizenship Now, and you can find us online at CUNY.edu/citizenship now. Free immigration services for all New Yorkers.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. We will see you next time.